You'll be alright going to the hospital on your own, right? Otherwise, I swear, I'll send you straight to hell. Those were my husband Porter's harsh words as he forced me out of the car when my water broke. My name is Marin, and I'm 9 months pregnant with our first child. I've been anxious, but also so grateful for this new chapter in our lives. Porter, my husband, works a desk job and usually has the weekends off, but he rarely offers much help at home. Most weekends, he heads back to his parents' house, which is close by. It's strange. He doesn't have any real reason to go, yet he spends almost every weekend there instead of with me. Since becoming pregnant, I've avoided heavy lifting to stay safe. When I buy groceries like big bags of rice, friends help out. My daily routine starts early as I prepare breakfast, see Porter off to work, clean the house, do the laundry, and go shopping if needed. Once I finish, I get a few quiet moments to myself. Since starting maternity leave, I took up blogging about my day-to-day life, capturing little things like meals, flowers, and sunsets. It's become a small joy for me. One evening, Porter returned from work as I prepared dinner. He tossed his bag and jacket on the sofa, and as always, I tidied them up. "Welcome back," I said, trying to keep things warm. "Dinner's ready. I made hamburgers tonight." But he just went straight to the bathroom, barely responding. After 3 years of marriage, I'd gotten used to his lack of affection or thoughtfulness, though sometimes I wondered if this was really what marriage was supposed to feel like. After a shower, I offered him a drink. "Where's the beer?" he asked, irritated that it wasn't on the table. I apologized, explaining that I'd forgotten to buy it that day. "Then go to the store now," he demanded, his tone sharp and unforgiving. His request shocked me. I'm 9 months pregnant, yet he wanted me to go buy beer. I tried to explain, saying it was hard for me to get around, but he only got angrier, insisting that pregnancy wasn't a reason for special treatment. He said, "My mother always kept active when she was pregnant." His anger scared me, so I reluctantly went to the store. At the store, I bumped into Emery, our neighbor. "Marin, what brings you here so late?" she asked with a warm smile. I explained how Porter wanted beer and insisted I go buy it. "Why didn't he go himself?" Emery asked, concerned. "That's what I said, but he didn't listen," I replied. Emery encouraged me to take it easy and offered a comforting word as we parted ways. When I returned home, Porter was on the sofa, watching TV. "What took you so long?" he grumbled. "Just give me the beer." His words felt like a slap. I quietly handed him the beer, cleaned up after dinner, and headed to bed. My heart ached from his harshness, especially now that I was pregnant. The next morning, Porter acted like nothing had happened, but I couldn't forget his words. The days went by, and as my due date got closer, Porter grew more distant. One day, he announced a family trip with his parents right around my due date. I tried to protest, explaining that it wasn't safe for me to travel. "Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you're sick," he snapped. My opinion didn't matter. He'd already made the plans. The day of the trip arrived, and I tried to excuse myself, saying I didn't feel well. "You'll be fine," he said dismissively, urging me into the car. As I got in, I felt a warm sensation at my feet. My water had broken. "Porter, my water broke. We need to go to the hospital." But he looked annoyed. "Get out," he said, horrified I'd mess up the car. He then drove off, leaving me stranded. Luckily, Emery was nearby and rushed to help me. She called a taxi and stayed by my side as I made it to the hospital. Emery even contacted my parents, who arrived as quickly as they could. Thanks to her kindness, I got through labor, and soon after, our baby was born. As I held my newborn in my arms, I realized I didn't need Porter's approval or presence anymore. Afterward, Porter's attitude didn't improve. He kept sending me angry messages, insisting I come back to him. His family even blamed me, saying I was a bad wife. But my parents were on my side. I moved in with them for support, and together we decided I should get a divorce. Emery, who I later found out was the wife of the CEO at Porter's company, even offered to help me. Her husband found out about Porter's behavior, which eventually led to Porter losing his job. Now, with no steady income, he struggled to make ends meet. As I began adjusting to single life with my new baby, my bond with Emery and her family deepened. They visited often, and I even became close to Emery's son, who was around my age. Over time, we grew closer, and eventually, I found myself starting a new relationship with him, a twist I never saw coming. Looking back, I'm thankful for the support I found in friends and family. I was no longer bound by a loveless marriage, and I could focus on giving my child a happy, loving home. Life had changed in ways I hadn't expected, but I had never felt stronger. Porter constantly compared me to his mother, never considering how painful those comparisons were. One night, he took a look at the dinner I'd prepared and scoffed, "I can't eat this. Go buy something better." Hearing this, my heart sank. It was already late, and I had just taken a bath. "Can't you go buy it yourself?" I asked, feeling frustrated. Porter glared. "Forget it. First, you forgot to buy beer, and now you didn't even prepare a proper dinner." Then, without another word, he stormed out, heading to his parents' place. As I sat alone in our quiet home, a strange sense of relief washed over me. The next morning, as I expected, I received a call from his mother, furious about how I had neglected Porter. I explained what happened, but she wouldn't listen, so I apologized just to end the conversation. Afterward, I felt even more down. With Porter away, I decided to have a quiet, late brunch. But thoughts of him returning later that night weighed on my mind. Remembering the previous night's events, I decided to make a special dinner that evening, hoping it would calm things down. I picked out the best ingredients, even adding Porter's favorite beer to the cart, determined to prepare a meal that would win his approval. I set the table beautifully, giving the meal my full attention. Looking at the finished table, I felt proud and thought, this has to make him happy. I waited patiently for him to come home. As time passed with no sign of him, I began to worry. I tried calling him several times, but there was no answer. After an hour, then two, my worry turned to anxiety. Maybe he went to his parents' house, I thought, so I called them. But they said he hadn't come by either. It was nearing midnight when Porter finally staggered through the door, clearly drunk. "I'm home," he mumbled, collapsing onto the hallway floor. I rushed over, concerned. "Are you okay?" I asked, trying to help him. But he pushed me away, slurring, "Get off me. Don't touch me with that ugly face." His words hit me like a slap, and he simply lay there on the floor. I stood there, shocked and hurt, tears filling my eyes. I had put so much effort into a nice dinner, only for it to go completely unappreciated. The next morning, Porter woke up groggy, complaining about a headache. He looked at me and asked, "Why did you leave me lying in the hallway?" I told him he had chosen to lie down there, and it wasn't my fault. "Aren't you my wife? You're supposed to take care of me when I'm drunk," he said, as if it was the most obvious thing in the world. I felt drained, wondering why he blamed me for everything. "If you weren't going to eat at home, you could have let me know. I prepared a nice meal, and even tried calling you several times. Why didn't you answer?" I asked. Porter just shrugged. "My drinking party got rescheduled to last night. I don't need to report everything to you. It's hard to pick up the phone during a gathering," he said coldly. With every word, my heart grew colder, my hopes of him being a loving husband fading further. Realizing I couldn't change him, I began thinking of my own happiness. Our baby was due soon, and despite stories I'd heard about labor pains, my excitement to meet this new life outweighed any fears. Neighbors often encouraged me, saying, "It's just a little while longer," which helped lift my spirits. One day, Porter came home with an unexpected suggestion. "Hey, let's go on a family trip," he said. I was taken aback, thinking he meant just us, but then he clarified, "My parents want to come along too." I felt uneasy about it. Whenever there was an issue between Porter and me, his parents always blamed me. Still, I politely reminded him that my due date was right around the corner, and it wasn't safe to travel long distances. He looked annoyed and said, "How many times do I have to tell you? Just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you're sick. My parents are inviting us out of thoughtfulness." I tried to object, saying it was too close to my due date, but he just snapped, "Do as you're told. Everything's already decided. We're going for 2 nights next week." Then, without another word, he left the room. I felt cornered, worried, and unsure of what to do. The next day, I sought advice from a close friend, explaining the situation. She was concerned and said, "That's really pushing it." We discussed ways I might politely decline, but before I could finalize a plan, the day of the trip arrived. "Actually, I'm not feeling well today. I'm worried about the baby, so I think it's best if I stay home," I told Porter, hoping he'd understand. But he only seemed more irritated. I tried to excuse myself from the trip, telling Porter I didn't feel well and was worried about the baby. But he wouldn't listen. "Just rest in the car. You'll be fine. Come on, bring the luggage. We're heading to my parents' house, so hurry up." Feeling uneasy, I asked, "Is this really okay?" But Porter didn't even respond as he loaded the bags into the car. As I sat in the passenger seat, I suddenly felt warmth spreading at my feet. I looked down and saw water pooling around me. My water had broken. "Porter, my water just broke. Please take me to the hospital." Porter looked stunned, but instead of helping, he muttered, "Are you serious?" I nodded, saying, "Yes, we need to go to the hospital now. The baby might be coming." Instead of driving off, Porter opened the passenger door, grabbed a towel, and began wiping at the water. "What are you doing?" I asked, confused. "Get out," he said coldly. "You're making a mess in the car." I was in complete shock. "What are you saying?" I asked, but he just repeated, "Get out. I need to clean this up." Then, without another word, he pulled me out of the car. "We were supposed to be on a family trip," he said angrily. "Just go to the hospital by yourself." He got back into the car and drove away, leaving me standing there, overwhelmed and scared. As I tried to process what had just happened, a familiar voice called out, "Maren, are you okay?" It was Emery, our kind neighbor. Seeing my distress, she quickly arranged for a special taxi to take me to the hospital and stayed by my side, comforting me throughout the ride. Tears streamed down my face, grateful for her kindness and support. She held my hand, cheering me on as we reached the hospital. Even as my labor pains intensified, she stayed by my side until I was taken into my room. Before going into the delivery room, I made a silent promise. I won't let him get away with this, despite the growing pain. Emery held my hand and kept reassuring me. She even called my parents, who arrived quickly, looking deeply worried. Emery gently whispered something to them, and they nodded. The three of them stepped out for a private conversation as the labor pains grew stronger. While waiting, I noticed my phone vibrating. My mom checked it and saw Porter's name. She looked disappointed but handed me the phone. When I answered, Porter's panicked voice came through. "Help me." I was in no mood to talk, so I ended the call without a word. My parents turned off my phone, but the messages from Porter kept pouring in. After enduring hours of labor, I finally heard my baby's first cries. My parents and Emery stood beside me with warm smiles. Relieved, I closed my eyes and finally rested. When I woke up, I saw my parents sitting by my side. "Are you okay?" my mom asked gently. Still tired, I could barely sit up. My father looked teary-eyed, and my mom comforted him, reminding him how exhausting the postpartum period could be. I couldn't help but smile at their concern. "Where's the baby?" I asked. My parents told me the baby was undergoing some routine tests, but would be back soon. I noticed Emery wasn't there, and, sensing my unspoken question, my mom said, "Emery left a little while ago." I felt a deep sense of gratitude, knowing she had been my rock during one of the scariest moments of my life. I promised myself that once I was discharged, I would visit her to properly express my thanks. I turned on my phone to let my friends know about the birth, only to be met with countless missed calls from Porter. But I felt no desire to answer. His calls no longer brought hope or comfort. I closed the notifications without hesitation. Later, one of my friends visited to congratulate me. I shared some of the recent events with her, and she was shocked and furious, joking that she'd like to give Porter a piece of her mind. She reminded me that my health and well-being were what mattered most now. When my parents, already briefed by Emery, gently asked about my plans with Porter, I told them I was considering divorce. They respected my decision and offered their full support. Upon discharge, I planned to stay with my parents, who had already prepared a room for me. Porter had tried to visit the hospital, but I'd informed the staff that I didn't wish to see him, so he wasn't allowed in. The next day, Emery came to visit, bringing a fruit basket. "Emery, you came," I said, delighted. She smiled warmly, advising me, "Just don't overdo it. Postpartum recovery can be tough." Her comforting words made me sigh with relief. I thanked her deeply, telling her how grateful I was. She laughed gently, saying, "The most important thing is that you and the baby are healthy." I just wanted to help. As we chatted, she mentioned I talked to my husband about what happened. He's pretty furious. I realized she was standing up for me in ways I hadn't anticipated. "Emery, I'm so sorry for getting you involved," I said, feeling a little guilty. But she just smiled, brushing off my concerns. Thanks to Emery's kindness, I felt a sense of peace despite everything that had happened. In that moment, I realized I was surrounded by people who truly cared for me, and with their support, I knew I'd be all right. I admitted to Emery, "I'm so sorry for involving you in all of this." She responded firmly, "Don't worry. Remember who made it possible for Porter to work at his current company." This was the first time I'd ever heard such a stern tone from Emery, and I realized she was truly at her limit with him too. Emery was, in fact, the wife of the CEO of the company where Porter worked. I had no idea about this when we first moved into the neighborhood, but over time, as we bumped into each other at local stores, we'd become closer friends. We'd even started having tea together, and in those chats, I learned more about her family and her husband's position. Porter, though, had no clue about Emery's connection. He rarely came with me to neighborhood events or interacted with our neighbors. Emery had once asked me not to tell him, saying she didn't want any trouble, so I'd kept it a secret. Over time, as my pregnancy progressed and Porter's unreasonable behavior continued, Emery had gently suggested, should I talk to him? But I'd always declined, not wanting to impose. This recent incident, though, seemed to have changed her mind. Now I understood why Porter was repeatedly calling Emery, perhaps in a last-ditch effort to save face. "I really can't thank you enough," I said, touched by her loyalty and strength. Seeing me tear up, Emery gave me a warm smile and said, "Marin, you're a dear friend. I couldn't just stand by when something like this happened to you." Our conversation was filled with heartfelt smiles and gratitude. However, Porter's messages continued pouring in. Ignoring the barrage of notifications, I focused on moving forward and thinking about what life would look like with my baby, free from Porter's hurtful ways. Just as I was preparing to leave the hospital, a close friend came to visit and handed me her phone, saying, "You need to see this." On her screen was a post that had become a hot topic on social media. Curious, I asked what it was about. She explained that she had shared what Porter had done on her page, and due to her large following, it had quickly gone viral. Apparently, one of her followers had actually witnessed Porter's behavior that day and had even captured a video of the scene where he'd left me out of the car. Out of respect, they blurred my face and, with my friend's permission, shared it online. The video spread like wildfire, and soon, Porter's identity and even his workplace were exposed. I had no idea things had reached this level. My friend gave me a gentle smile and said, "Well, they brought it on themselves, didn't they?" Porter's actions and their consequences were indeed the result of his choices. When confronted by friends, he apparently tried to defend himself, claiming, "I had a prior commitment with my parents that day. I had no choice." His excuse only sparked more outrage, and now not only he but his parents were facing criticism too. The story spread even in their neighborhood, and talk about his parents also started circulating online. Suddenly, my phone rang, showing a call from my mother-in-law. My friend, noticing the name on the screen, suggested, "Why don't you pick up and give her a piece of your mind?" But I felt too exhausted to engage, so I ignored it. Before long, my missed calls log was filled with messages from Porter, his father, and his mother. Since the incident had been so widely publicized, even the hospital staff seemed aware of my situation and went out of their way to offer support. Each time Porter or his family tried to visit or call, the hospital staff ensured I was left undisturbed. As my discharge date approached, I began to worry that Porter or his family might be waiting outside the hospital. My parents assured me You have nothing to worry about, but I was still nervous, especially for my baby's safety. On the day of my discharge, as my parents helped me gather my things, I suddenly heard Porter's voice calling out, "Marin." His parents' loud voices followed, and I felt panic rise. But then, out of nowhere, several men in black suits appeared, forming a protective shield around me. One of them gently opened the car door and said, "Don't worry. We're here on Mr. Smith's request to protect you." It seemed my parents were already in on the plan. Smiling, my mom reassured me, "Didn't I tell you there was nothing to worry about?" I felt a wave of relief as I got into the car, watching Porter and his parents try to approach, but being kept at a distance by the bodyguards. I couldn't find the words to express how grateful I was to Emery for supporting me through everything. The only thought on my mind was finding a way to thank her for everything she'd done. My parents shared the same sentiment, saying in unison, "We have to find a way to show our gratitude to Emery. We have to find a way to thank Emery for all she's done." My parents and I agreed. Though I was starting to adjust to my new life and enjoying pleasant days, Porter and his in-laws wouldn't stop contacting me. I sent them divorce papers, but they didn't respond. Then one day, my in-laws called our home. My father answered, and they boldly said, "She's part of our family, so no matter how she's treated, she shouldn't complain." This statement made my father furious, and he fired back. They seemed shocked and quickly ended the call.